And with that said, I'm going to get us started this evening. I want to make certain that I'm respectful of everybody's time. And please know if there is anything that we have not answered during this conversation, that we will stick around a little at the end. So if you're more comfortable asking in a smaller group, you are welcome to do that. We also welcome you to utilize the chat function feature. So we will be monitoring that for any questions as we go through this evening's conversation. So to begin with the introductions, my name is Megan Bennett. I am the superintendent here for Region 12 schools. I'm joined by Principal Don Shells, Assistant Principal Michael Croft, and also our board chairman, Greg Cava. So when questions get really hard, I will usually defer those to the experts who know far more than I do. And I do want to thank publicly Don and Mike for their efforts. We put together the district plan and a lot that goes into how are we going to collectively navigate this school year. And we do that with an eye on how this looks at the elementary level, how it looks at the secondary level. But it's really Mike Croft and Don Shells who then take it into its execution and look at logistically what needs to be done at Shepaug itself. So in as much as if you've looked at our district plan, that is more of a generalized guide of how we are going to begin this school year. And if you want to get the more specifics, you are going to be able to look at Shepaug's plan. And tonight we'll have the opportunity to talk about some of those factors that went into planning. So in beginning this conversation, I do want to let you know that how we start the school year is not necessarily how we are going to end the school year. We recognize that COVID is an ever evolving situation. And as we continue to go through this pandemic together, we look for opportunities to capture more learning experiences, but we capture those safely. And it is incredibly important to us that we control the variables and the risks that we are introducing at any point in time. And we evaluate those risks regularly with our departments of health, with CDC guidance, with the State Department of Education, and obviously with legal team and our medical advisors. So everything that we are doing, we are getting weekly, if not daily briefs on what is happening with our health conditions locally, as well as surrounding areas, so we can always stay one step ahead of COVID. So tonight I'm going to start by talking about some of our opening plan highlights. I think there's usually the key three that people want to know about, which usually comes down to masking, social distancing, and quarantining. So I'm going to start by talking about some of those. I'm going to go through a couple of highlights of our reopening plan. That said, I will certainly stop for any questions that come up as we go through this. And again, I want to make certain that I'm giving attention to things that matter to this community. So even if I have a prescribed way I think that this conversation is going to happen, it's usually because I'm not good with awkward silences. So I'm going to say, as you have questions that may come up, I certainly want to make certain that we're addressing those. So let me start by talking about the elephant in the room, which is masking. We will begin this school year with all people inside of our school buildings being masked. That is regardless of your vaccination status. We are going to make certain that students, when they come into the building, masks will be available to them, but we are asking that it is covering their nose and mouth at all times when they're inside of the building. We are saying that when they're outdoors, we are not having mask requirements, which also means that having PE outdoors will be that PE class is unmasked. When we are having students eating in times when they are going to be unmasked in the cafeteria, we are taking particular notice as for what is the distance between our students. It is incredibly important to us that we look at what are the different strategies that are happening at any one point in time. So we design our classroom experience because we know our students will be masked. They will be stationary, and therefore we can introduce less distance between our students and working with 3 feet of distance. If it is indeed where there's going to be active speaking, I'm thinking in terms of singing, in terms of our vocal and instrumental, that is where we introduce more space between the students for the reason that, again, we want to capitalize on still having that music experience, but recognizing there's additional risks that come with that. So you will hear some ebb and flow based on what is happening with that area and where is the social distancing and how we are navigating through. Right now, our masking is mandated by law. It is the executive order that Governor Lamont has put out until September 30th. So we are in compliance with that. We will continue to watch for what is the new guidance as we make decisions moving forward. So I started to move from masking automatically over to social distancing because of the fact that they run hand in hand. Because of the fact that our students are masked is where we can have students closer together within the classrooms. But we also recognize that last year we were very restrictive in keeping students in classroom. When they came into the building, they immediately went into their classrooms. They were immediately 6 feet apart. We wanted to make certain that we were keeping the space between so that we weren't introducing any potential contagions, any potential quarantine risks. Right now, in the classroom, the quarantine zone from somebody who is positive is within 3 feet for 15 or more minutes cumulatively over a 24-hour period of time. So we don't want to unnecessarily quarantine students. So knowing that that zone for a positive person is 3 feet within the classroom, we felt safe designing our classrooms for that 3 feet of distance. We are allowing students to utilize the mall this year. We are allowing students to utilize their lockers this year. However, we are also going to have supervision and monitoring to make certain that we have that social distance that is happening. So we want our students to socialize, but we want to make certain that we are keeping them safe as they do that. One of the things we do not want to have is that we bring our students back to school and we've changed too many variables and then we end up having an outbreak. So as we slowly introduce new experiences, it is done in a way that we are monitoring for those safe zones. We are monitoring for mask wearing. We are monitoring to make certain that our students can have those social interactions, but done so in a safe manner. So any questions regarding masking or social distancing at this point? Okay, I'm going to move us over to quarantine. So I shared that within the classroom, the distance between the students needs to be 3 feet. We will be conducting our contact tracing when we know that a student or a teacher or anyone has been tested for COVID and has received a positive result. Quarantine this year has been reduced from the 14 days to the 10 days. So if the student has been exposed and is not vaccinated, they will be put on a 10-day quarantine with the option to test at day 5 in order to shorten that quarantine to 7 days. So if a family decides they will just take the 10-day quarantine and do not want to do testing, that is allowed. But if you would like to shorten the quarantine to 7 days, you need a negative PCR test on the 5th day after exposure. I hope that makes some sense. The reason that we've made the decision in consultation with the Department of Health is that 95% of the infections occur within the first 10 days, and that is the incubation period. We know the full incubation period and best practices are 14 days. The reason we shortened it this year is recognizing that we do not have the remote learning opportunities that we've had in the past. We recognize the impact and the disruptive nature that quarantine has on students' learning. Now, if a student is put on quarantine, we will provide asynchronous learning opportunities with the opportunity for that student to meet with their teachers each day of that quarantine. So we are going to provide that academic support that is necessary. However, it won't be those live class lessons in having the student dial in. So that's where it became very important to us that we were balancing the student coming back sooner if it was indeed safe enough to make that decision. Now, when the student does come back, we are going to make certain that we are very strict on the mask wearing and that they are making certain that they have distance from classmates and staff members. So it will be with a heightened awareness of that social distancing, because again, we recognize that even though there's minimal risk, there is risk in shortening that quarantine period. Now I say all of that, and then I have to put a little asterisk, because as far as the student returning to sports or to PE class, they are not able to return until that full 14 days has expired since the positive contact. So it is very important that we recognize we may be letting the students back in to regular learning and general core classes at the 10 days. They may not be taking PE class, and they will not be participating in the sports until they clear that quarantine time. Other things that become important is that we are going to make certain that that student is keeping up with their workload. If the student who has been placed in quarantine does complete the work for that day and has met with their teacher or has done their check-in, they will be considered as remote present. So we recognize that being quarantined is out of the hands of our families. So we do want to make certain that we are recognizing the effort that is put in each day. Now that said, and we talk about quarantine, if the student is vaccinated, if the staff member is vaccinated and have come in contact with a COVID positive person, they do not need to quarantine. However, they will need to remain masked. They will need to remain socially distant from everyone in order to make certain that, again, we are minimizing any spread potential. But students who have been vaccinated will likely have a less disruptive school year than those who are unvaccinated. If you are indeed identified as somebody who is a close contact, we would ask for proof of the vaccination in order to be exempt from quarantine at that time. Any questions regarding quarantine, masking, or social distancing? Okay, so there are some freedoms that I want to say are coming back to our students. We had mentioned the fact that coming into school, they will have access to be in the mall before having to go to their classrooms. They will have access to their lockers. They will have the ability to travel in the hallways. They will have the ability to mix cohorts. So in the past last year, for those who remember, we stationed out where students would be at different times. We tried to have the students stay in one class and the teachers moved from class to class. Now, as we've learned and as we've grown, we've recognized that our students are able to share spaces and they will be able to change classrooms. And I think that movement will be welcomed by our students. We are returning to the 7-period day that we have had prior to last year. I know we had many families who enjoyed the block schedule and really wanted us to continue it this year. Unfortunately, the block schedule that we introduced last year was really that reaction to COVID to lessen the amount of hallway travel and to make certain we were reducing the amount of exposures. However, we also know that we have to work with our unions. We have to make certain that we've planned for having block scheduling. There were many things we weren't able to do because of block scheduling, including having teachers meet. We had some problems with meeting times, special education planning. And so until we can thoughtfully move our schedule to what should be the future of Shepaug, we don't want to have a reactionary schedule based on COVID. So I do see a question, so I'm going to go over into the chat for one moment, and it says, if the child is vaccinated and comes in contact with somebody with coronavirus at the school, and your child does not experience corona symptoms, your child will not be required to quarantine. And I'm going to say that is absolutely correct, Marianne. And one of the things, you're right, Marianne, I failed to say is that a vaccinated child who is exposed needs to remain asymptomatic. So the moment they start showing symptoms, at that point, we assume they have COVID and they would be out of school. But you are correct. All right, I see the question, isn't block scheduling the table for next year? And I'm going to say it is on the table. So next year, we are spending this year doing a full exploration of our schedule. And at that point, we would work with our unions, negotiations. We would budget for these decisions and make certain that we choose a schedule that is best for all students. So we are exploring schedules in the future. This year, we went back to what was the schedule that we had known pre-COVID at this time. So we talked about arrivals where the students are now going to be able to come into the mall and have some social opportunities. We are also changing the arrival procedures because we will not be taking temperatures for students when they arrive at school. I can tell you, I think we realized in January that not all temperature readings were accurate. By taking the students' temperatures each day, what we did have the ability to do was we did have the ability to have conversations with our students. We were able to assess, see how they looked, not just how they were in appearance and physically fit, but we were also able to see emotionally and socially how they were doing. We recognize we can still do that. We do not have to have the thermometer in our hand. I can say embarrassingly, I think one day we recorded a child's temperature at 83.2. That was the all-time low. But so we recognize they were not valid readings, but it is one to say we are going to do away with the temperature screenings that had happened in the past. I see that there are two questions that have come up. How will I determine to move to phase 2? And I'm going to just quickly go through phase 1 and phase 2 so you can hear in the reopening plan, and then I will talk about how we're going to evaluate to go to that phase. When you looked at our opening plan, what you will see is that this year we have changed, so we no longer have the 3 phases, we only have 2 phases. Last year, our 3 phases were phase 1 was that we were operating with 6 feet of distance, and we operated on a modified schedule. Phase 2 would have been the hybrid, and phase 3 would have been fully remote learning. This year, because we did not have to implement the phase 2 or phase 3 of last year, we have redesigned our phases. So phase 1 is 3 feet within the classroom. And back to a regular schedule. If we need to go to phase 2 is what we experienced all last year. We have a proven model on how to keep our children safe within our schools. So for us conducting our lessons with 3 feet of distance and on a regular schedule, is going to be continued. It will change over if we see there's spread that starts to happen in our school. We continue to collect data. When we have students who go into quarantine, we look to see how many test positive. We look to see how many students are impacted. And if we see that 3 feet creates a spread zone, then at that point, we will transition back to what was our operating conditions of last year, which is phase 2. This will also be done under consultation with our department's health, and also making certain that we communicate that change to our families so that way people can adjust accordingly. So all of this will be done with open communication. We have a question asking if the students will be wearing masks during chorus when singing, and is that social distance 3 feet apart? The answer to that question is going to be chorus at times is held outdoors as much as possible. So that way they don't have to be masked and we can work on singing practices. If they do come indoors for chorus, we do extend the social distancing. It goes from 3 feet to 12 feet. So it does, it increases the need to distance a great deal. I can tell you what we did last year. I worked with Mark Obowitz, Beth Harvison, and every week we looked at what were the local health conditions, and we made the decision on whether or not we could conduct lessons indoors or whether they need to move outdoors. So we were constantly looking at the schedules to say what opportunities could we present and what were the conditions in which those lessons needed to happen. I can share with you additionally that the administration has purchased again the covers that go at the end of any wind instrument. So that is the mask, so to say, at the end of the trumpet and the mask at the end of a flute or clarinet to make certain that we are catching any droplets. So we are looking to hold the music program to the best of our ability this year. And that's a great question. Anything else, Mr. Shells or Mr. Croft, that you want to introduce when talking about the music?
No, I think you covered it, Superintendent Bennett. And the goal, as you said, is to let our students start performing again while privileging safety. And we think we have the right mitigation measures and the right distancing and the right protocols to let the music ring out again.
All right. So continuing on, and we talked about music going outdoors, I also want to share with our families that we are going to capitalize on opportunities for lessons to be outdoors. The freedom of being unmasked when outdoors is something that we'd like to take advantage of. Again, Shepaug is working with our town of Washington to make certain we have permits for our tents, that our tents are going up, so our students are protected from the elements while enjoying the fresh air and getting the education that they need and some freedom without masks. So one of the things I'm going to say is we recognize fresh air is king. We were very fortunate at the timing that we put in the new HVAC system last year, because it does take in air from the outside and we had better ventilation than we would have otherwise. That said, we also utilize our windows. And even though air conditioning is going, and I know it's not environmentally sound, our children's health is prioritized at this moment. So we may have the air conditionings running, the windows may be open, and we are looking to make certain we introduce that fresh air as much as possible. Other freedoms that will happen with our students this year is that there's no longer the restrictions of who can use which bathrooms. We will allow students to use the closest bathroom. And it is one that, with the cohorting not being one of the requirements that we need this year, it also means that we can have students learning with one another with mixed ability groups and just introducing more interactions and social opportunities. So we will be providing mask breaks again this year. They are going to be in shorter durations. We are going to make certain that we are not interrupting learning time. We recognize there is a need for our students to focus on education. And yet we also balance that with recognizing there's a comfort of getting that fresh air, taking off the mask, and then coming back in. So the administrative team has made schedules to make certain that people are also aware of not interrupting the same class every day, finding the balance. I think what you're going to see within the next week or so is that the standardized tests are going to be shared with communities at large. Proud to say that our students did well in comparison with other districts. However, I'm also going to say we recognize we did not perform to the standards that Region 12 is used to, and that's okay. We expect that. We knew those things were going to happen, but we also recognize that there's a need to make certain our children are prepared for the future that they need. We want to make certain that they can take on any challenge because we have provided them the foundations of learning. And that has to be because we are prioritizing the learning and the instruction that is happening. I see a question that has come up in the chat. Will there be cohorts and assigned areas for lunch? And if it's okay, Mr. Croft and Mr. Shells, I'm going to turn over to you to talk about what lunch looks like.
Sure. And first, let me thank Mr. Croft and Mr. Boucher, who are our two master schedulers here and have really impressive skill sets, among other things, for logistics and planning, which I really appreciate. And Mr. Croft will probably weigh in here soon, too. But as far as our lunch procedure goes, I'm sorry, can you all hear me? Oh. As far as lunch procedure goes, there'll be two lunch waves, one for the high school and one for the middle school. And we have sufficient space to let students get their lunch, full servery again this year. They can buy breakfast and lunch here, a free breakfast and a free lunch, actually, then with a la carte items available for purchase. In addition to that, they'll be able to get their lunch, move through the line in the cafeteria and their breakfast, socially distanced on the line, and then find seating that's at an acceptable distance, either in the cafeteria or the mall for seniors, or other adjacent rooms that they can quickly get to where we have seating mapped out with safe distances so that they can eat and socialize, but still not be on top of each other. Mr. Croft, did you want to add anything to that?
Only that we'll be outside a lot. What Mr. Shells described is only in bad weather. When the weather is good or even just acceptable, and there are many days that are below the quality where a 14-year-old or 15, 16-year-old would actually like to go outside, when we are shutting the doors to the cafeteria and saying, let's go outside and eat. So certainly in the beginning of the year, the lunches will most often be outside.
And we had a question in the chat regarding the free lunches that we experienced last year. And we will again have the benefit of having free lunch. We do ask that our families, actually, I don't even think we're opening up the survey. I'm sorry, I was about to go into the elementary practice because the elementary people have to order online. We are opening up our serveries at Shepaug, so that will look different, but it will be a free lunch service for our students. I think they will have to purchase for snacks, but for the core lunch program, that is free.
Can I make one more comment about lunch? And that is simply to ask for patience in the first couple of days of lunch as we figure out the routines of a modified process in the servery and of getting students to a couple of remote classrooms. We do expect a couple of bumps. We think we've got a really good plan, but we expect a couple of bumps in those first couple of days that will get smoothed out. It's certainly possible that someone might have a little bit less time than they would like in the first day or two, but we really think that after a little bit of practice, that it will be as smooth as ever.
I think that's a very good point. And we did recognize that last year, the lunches, we had students cohorted, the lunches were picked up in the different areas. There was some congregation that still happened. We've now figured how to utilize the servery so that way we can mark off students. So there's some distancing within that lines, minimizing the amount of time they're in that lines, as well as measuring out what would be appropriate distances between eating. I see that one of the other questions is, so it's the normal lunches that they used to be and not the bag lunches like last year. And that answer is correct for our secondary students. So our primary students in the elementary schools will continue to have the bag lunches that happened last year, as those are prepared at Shepaug and need to be delivered to our elementary schools. So again, this year, we're very excited. We started a new partnership. So Ed Advance is going to be operating our cafeterias. They're able to buy in larger quantities, which also means that we will have more opportunities. There will be more variety to the lunches that we can offer. So we are very excited about this partnership that we're entering into. So again, we hope that the students see the changes and they are to the positive. So as I don't see any questions right now, I'm going to talk a little bit about busing. So we are going to, again, have assigned seating on our buses. We need that more for contact tracing purposes than anything. We do have, because we do need to continue to have social distancing on the bus, there will be a single rider per seat. We will have windows down to make certain that ventilation continues, and our students will need to be masked throughout the ride. We are, in some of our buses, operating on full capacity. We also are not going to be allowing the bus switches to happen. So if it needs to be a regular ridership regarding the buses that the students access each day. We do know that some of our routes have changed. And so if you have any questions regarding bus routes or availability, if there are switches that need to happen, we ask that you work directly with the main office. But please know those days where it may be a student going to a friend's house, we cannot facilitate that through our bus system right now. So our buses are one mode of transportation. The other is parent or student driver drop-off. We did experience some issues at Shepaug, and anybody who came to pick up their child, I'm certain felt some of the frustration of the line of cars that typically went down South Street. And one of our problems became, and what was the traffic jam was, that some of our parents came to pick up their children far in advance of the end of the school day. And we had done a staggered release, so we knew that that was going to happen as we tried to accommodate for not having as many students in the hallway all at once. This year, we will be working bell to bell. So we will not be dismissing our students before the end of the day. So we ask that families try not to get to the school excessively early, as it does interrupt traffic patterns with our buses. Mr. Croft, anything you want to share from experiences of last year that we can improve upon, and asking for our parents' help?
No, I think that's simply it. I think that we'll have to see if there are fewer students getting dropped off and more students riding the bus this year, or vice versa, and that will affect how the end of the day actually goes. But I think you've got it exactly right.
Okay. So other things that are happening this year, we will see some more regular cleaning practices and less that are so intensive. So we recognize that we sanitized everything and over sanitized everything, and recognizing that's also not the healthiest option for us. So we will have cleaners that are available within the classrooms. They are green cleaners, but we will be doing the regular cleaning practices, which does include disinfectant daily, but it's not to the extent that we had done last year, and that is by CDC guidance. So we have not taken that step too far. That is one that we recognize how the COVID virus travels, and it is a safe practice to return to regular cleaning practices. We are excited to open up our facilities to for use after school hours. We are still going to be very protective and guarded during the school hours. So anybody who's not essential to come into the school, we're going to ask that that happens after school. Additionally, we did find that some families preferred virtual meetings to in-person meetings, but we will give our families the option of both this year. We recognize that some people prefer to have an in-person meeting because body language, they can look over the materials with the staff member and find that more appropriate in order to help make decisions for their children. Others found that the virtual conversation worked out very well for them and made it easier for work schedules. So we will invite both options this year, and we will work with our families to find out what works best for them. But with that said, our open house will be done virtually this year. Part of the reason for that is we cannot get social distancing in our classrooms with parents, with both parents there, and recognizing that may be a spread that we can reduce risk with by just shifting to the virtual environment. That has been our decision for our open house this year. But we are excited that we will be moving towards some events. You may see the events will look different, whether they're outdoors. If you come to our sporting events, I'm very happy to say that fall sporting events, knowing that they are outdoors, we are not restricting spectator size, but we are asking people to socially distance, even if they are not masked when coming to our sporting events. So you are going to see the events slowly coming back. We will introduce more opportunities as we know it is safe to do so. But my hope is what you see is that as we compare last year to this year, we have capitalized on some of those opportunities that are available to us, but we're also going to utilize some of those practices that we found beneficial during our experience last year. So Mr. Croft and Mr. Shells, is there anything that you would like to share at this time? Because I've gone through my highlights for our opening plan, but anything you want to talk about before we open the floor to questions?
Just to reiterate that we're thrilled to welcome you back to your school and your students back to their school, and that we do have a strong belief that we have the right plan in place to keep everyone safe and advance really meaningful teaching and learning. And I know this is not ideal, and we've been through so much, but we're moving towards better times, and we're moving into a space where I think kids will start to feel that they're reconnected to their school. Now, of course, your school was open last year, so you already had strong connections, but I think we're going to make those even more firm this year. And I'm certainly looking forward to getting to know everyone and working with you.
And I think we did cover everything, and I echo Mr. Shell's enthusiasm for what we think will be a year that is a big step forward. I think that in many ways, from lunchtime to masks to schedules to transitions, students will be much more, they will feel like they're being treated their age. One of the challenges of last year was we felt like we were having to treat 18-year-olds like they were 7 years old and supervise them like they were 7 years old. And we think that we're not quite to the point where we want to be, but we do think that your students will feel freedoms while also understanding that they're in a safe environment.
Well said. And Mr. Kava, I know that the board has been incredibly supportive of everything that has happened and has afforded us many opportunities and financially supported all of our endeavors during this pandemic. Is there anything you'd like to share with our families?
No, just that we are obviously anxious to return to a normal environment, where we're doing things where our mall is got the furniture back out and students are able to congregate and be there. We're just not quite there yet. And we are going to make sure that we follow the appropriate guidance. The board is supportive of the efforts of the district management of Ms. Bennett and her staff to properly manage this thing, to keep your children safe and to keep staff members safe. This is our obviously our biggest concern, is to keep everyone safe in a very challenging environment. And we're going to get there, and we're going to get back to one day, hopefully soon, to a more normal event. But I cannot stress enough that the way to get the masks off and back to normal is for everyone to be vaccinated. And this is the message that's come down from the State Department of Public Health, from our public health director. And our public health director the other night at the board meeting was present for the meeting and said one thing. She said, look, you're not getting vaccinated. We're not having you get vaccinated to prevent you from getting COVID. We're having you get vaccinated to prevent you from ending up in the intensive care unit on a ventilator or dying. That's what the vaccine does. You may still get COVID even if you get the vaccine, but you'll get a mild version of it as opposed to putting you in that risky situation. So the sooner we get everyone vaccinated, the sooner we will return to normal. That is the big stumbling block in this whole situation nationwide, and no less here. Even though in New England we're much better vaccination records than most of the rest of the country, we're still not where we need to be. So I just encourage everyone to think that through, talk to your neighbors, encourage people to get vaccinated, because that's how we get back to normal, and that's where we want to get.
Thank you. And that brings us, and actually I'm going to skip over one question just because I think the segue to the conversation about vaccination. The question was the percentage of our faculty that are vaccinated and students. We've pulled our faculty, and at this time, out of the 136 of our staff members that have responded, we had 98% of them responding that they are fully vaccinated. We have 44 outstanding responses, meaning that they haven't responded just as of yet. So even if they were to respond to the negative, that puts us at 75%. Again, but that is an unknown. We will be working with our faculty directly. I'm certain many of you saw the news regarding mandatory vaccination for school staff. We're still working with legal to understand how that's going to play out, but that is one that we are working very closely with. The question regarding how many of our students are, we had from the survey that I sent out to our families, we had 262 people respond to that. That only went to our Shepaug families, since it's just 12 and older that are eligible for vaccination. So of the 450, we know that approximately about 100 students are not eligible for the vaccination at this point. So that puts us about 350. Of those 350, 262 people responded. With 216 reporting that they are fully vaccinated and 32 reporting that they will be fully vaccinated at some point during the school year. So I hope that at least gives you some of the information regarding what is happening. We also, as you saw, I shared with our community in an email what it looks like for our community vaccination rates. So all of that we will continue to monitor for and look again, because that is one of the mitigation strategies that open up us to remove some of the other variables that are out there as we create a layered system of protection for our kiddos.
Megan, I'm sorry, could I add one thing? I forgot to say this when I talked before. We are very fortunate to have a director of health out of New Milford who is an epidemiologist. Talk about having the right health specialty for the right time. And so when I quote her and when I cite to her, it's someone who has the appropriate background to be able to help us through this, which is a godsend, absolutely a godsend to this region.
Sorry, I was having problems unmuting. The next question that we had was about gym classes and if students will be able to change in the locker rooms like pre-COVID. Mr. Croft, I feel like you want to answer this.
I no, I just yes, the students will be using the locker rooms as they were pre-COVID, with some additional gender-specific supervision to ensure safe distancing.
All right, we had a question about repeating our quarantine guidelines. So if somebody is exposed to COVID and they are unvaccinated, they need to quarantine for 10 days, which can be shortened to 7 days if they are tested after the 5th day of exposure using a PCR test. The other thing, and as Mr. Cava has shared the celebration of the new Milford Health Department, we have also worked out a partnership with the health department where they will conduct free testing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings from 9 a.m. to 10:30. So if indeed there is an exposure, they will provide that PCR testing to families. So that is another option on how to get your child tested after the 5th day. So it is not the 14 days for returning to the classroom. However, it is the 14 days when it comes to athletics, and be it gym class or be it the actual field. So I'm monitoring the chat for additional questions.
While you do that, Mrs. Bennett, I'm going to remember to say one more thing, which is that while our high school students will use the mall before school to socialize in a distance way, our middle school students will go directly to homeroom, which is our pre-COVID practice. That's normal for them. So just want to clarify that.
Thank you. That's a big clarification and appreciated. Other thoughts, comments? Okay, well, as I said, we are going to stick around, but I want to say to you all, we truly appreciate the trust you install in us and what you have afforded us to do. Last year, Region 12 was able to be in school full-time because of the efforts you took to keep our community safe. And I want to say that level of trust will not be misused. It is one that you have to know our greatest duty is to keep your children safe as we try to educate them. And so that will be continuing this year. And we hope that it is one that we can gain more finesse. We're going to continue to get better at this. But I'm also going to say to you that we rely on a lot of experts. And as I shared with you, we have epidemiologists who are working with us and giving us information. We have legal who is giving us guidelines. We meet weekly with our medical advisors and the Department of Health. We are taking a lot of information from our experts. But one of the things I need to also share with you is you are the expert for your child. And any information you can provide to us about what your child is experiencing and how they're feeling or how it's going for their educational progress will only help us make better decisions. We rely on our experts, and you are our experts. And we thank you for your partnership. So for those who want to stick around, I'm going to continue to answer the questions that I see in the chat box, but I want to also thank everybody for their time and coming out tonight, and also for everything you do to make Shepaug the wonderful place that it is. So I'm going to go into the questions in the chat box. If it's okay, I'm going to continue to move forward. What steps will be taken to mitigate learning loss that are caused by exposed quarantine? We will be providing asynchronous learning material, so we will utilize the Google Classroom platform. We will continue to provide the students the work, and they will also get daily check-ins with their teacher every day of quarantine. So we know that quarantine is going to be disruptive, but we are going to contain the disruption as much as possible. Part of the reason that we did shorten quarantine was also that realization that asynchronous learning is not as powerful as synchronous learning. So it is one where we want to make certain that we are doing those regular check-ins with the students. And that also helps us to know if they're remaining healthy and how we can support them. The question is 14 days for sports. What about band and chorus? That is a very good point, and absolutely anything that provides additional risk. We know that they are a risk when inviting them to practice in music and chorus. So we would then work with the 14 days. So that is an excellent point. It is one that I have not highlighted. So thank you very much, Chris, for pointing that out. All right. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start asking you guys questions if I don't have anything coming up in the chat box. My hope is that your children are excited. I know we are. Oh, I see a hand raised. Miss Traco?
Hi, Miss Bennett. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm taking this opportunity to walk while I'm listening in because during the COVID, we were sitting down in front of our computers so much. So definitely need the exercise. So if you hear a car passing by while I'm talking, I apologize for that. So first, I want to thank you. As you know, we're a tuition-in family, and I just want to say our experience last year was obviously, it was a COVID experience, but we really were grateful for everything you guys were able to do for the students and for families. And so we liked it so much that we're back this year. So it's all good. My question is very specific. I was waiting for the end. I didn't want to interrupt anybody, but you know, we were offered an opportunity to take a bus last year because there was a bus stop that was convenient, and that is no longer available this year because I guess that bus stop is was for a student that has graduated. So we have a little sort of a dilemma. I called the office today to ask, and I wasn't 100% sure if the answer was clear to me, but we would need our son to wait for us to pick him up for a few minutes at the mall in school. And you talked a lot about ability now to have that opportunity to be at the mall after dismissal, I guess. And I just wanted to clarify that that will be okay. And if you know, if it doesn't become available, if it's no longer available, what the other options we would have.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Go, I'm watching our administrator's head shake as a yes and an affirmative. So Mr. Croft,
good.
want to just let her know and assure that that's still an okay option.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. That's going to be easy. We're happy to accommodate that. The children can be supervised, and that's not a problem.
Oh, wonderful. That will be great. Yeah, because we are really, it's a matter of like 15 minutes, 20 minutes after dismissal, no more than that. So just wanted to make sure we're not breaking any rules. Thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your communication, so thank you. I see a question regarding if there's assigned seating for the out-of-district students. There is assigned seating that also occurs with that. Again, the assigned seating is based on our ability to contact trace on our transportation. So yes, there's assigned seating. And then the question is, will Danbury bus be direct to Shepaug? I believe Danbury shares with Bethel and Brookfield when it comes to our agri-science. So I believe those three towns work together in order to coordinate transportation. So as far as a direct to Shepaug, it is picking up other districts and agri-science students on the way to Shepaug, but it is not a detour out of the way. So it's all planned within the route. No problem. and welcome to Shepaug. All right. Waiting for those additional questions that people may have. We will be welcoming back our animals. Again, I believe next week our horses are coming back. We are looking forward to our partnership with Little Britches again. We are certainly trying to make certain we provide those opportunities, especially the ones that we saw we could perform safely last year. We are inviting those again this year.
We are also opening the planetarium this year
We are.
with a state-of-the-art 21st century system that we're having installed in November. So continuing to hope to offer more opportunities for students.
Well, we have homecoming this year with food trucks and everything. I'm going to say, like, we've got fingers crossed. We're waiting to see a little bit sooner. I don't want anybody going out and buying dresses in advance just yet. But, you know, we certainly want to make certain that we look for opportunities when we can. We were very proud of how prom went off last year. The outdoors, the excitement. So if we can capture some of those same environments, we will certainly look to do those things. But I don't want to overpromise just yet. So we will use caution, but we are trying. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer. I like the comment that it is awesome news about the planetarium. I'm going to say, yes, it is. We are very excited. And actually the furniture was just delivered today too. So very excited as everything is moving forward. So other things that are coming up.
And here's an insight into remote learning.
This is filling those spaces, you know. Usually I could read the crowd. I'd know when you guys are all looking like you're done. It's too much, but a little harder when we're doing it through the virtual means. So if anybody has any other questions, but otherwise I'm going to say to you, thank you again for coming out tonight. We will stay and linger, but at this point we are closing the presentation regarding our opening plan, and thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. And
Thank
you have
you.
a direct pipeline to us anyway. If you think of a question after tonight, please call me or write me anytime. Mr. Croft as well.
Thank you all.
Give it another minute. I'm going to actually stop recording now, if that's okay with you, gentlemen.